My name exploded across the headlines before the sun had fully risen. By 8 a.m., my phone wouldn't stop vibrating, my inbox was flooded with messages from strangers, and news vans were parked outside my apartment building like I had committed a crime. Except I hadn't. I had simply told the truth at the worst possible time, and somehow the truth had turned into a national storm. But in the middle of that chaos, in the bright, unforgiving daylight, she looked at me with trembling eyes and asked just 4 words that changed everything: "Can you hug me?" Before we begin, if you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that even in our worst moments, compassion can rewrite the ending. The morning my name hit the headlines started like any other weekday. The sunlight poured through the thin curtains of my small living room, warm and ordinary. I was making tea when my best friend Kareem called me, his voice sharp and urgent. He told me to turn on the television. I laughed at first, thinking he was joking. But when I picked up the remote and saw my face on the screen, framed by bold red letters, the air left my lungs. My testimony from the city council meeting the night before had gone viral. I had exposed corruption inside the construction company I worked for, a company that had cut corners on a public school renovation project. I hadn't planned to become a whistleblower. I had simply refused to stay silent after discovering safety reports that were altered and hidden. The company's CEO, Rizwan Qadir, had always seemed untouchable. He was respected in Karachi, donated to charities, appeared at ribbon-cutting ceremonies, and smiled for cameras. But behind closed doors, he signed off on decisions that risked children's lives. I had proof. I had documents. And the night before, under the harsh fluorescent lights of the council chamber, I chose to speak. By sunrise, the story had spread far beyond the chamber walls. News anchors debated my courage. Commentators questioned my motives. Social media turned my name into a hashtag. Some people called me a hero. Others called me a traitor. The company issued a statement denying everything and hinting that I was a disgruntled employee seeking attention. I could almost hear the machinery of damage control grinding into motion. I stepped outside my apartment building later that morning, and the world felt different. Neighbors who once nodded politely now stared openly. A woman I didn't recognize whispered into her phone while glancing at me. A young delivery rider asked for a selfie. I didn't know whether to feel proud or afraid. Maybe both. That's when I saw her across the street. Her name was Mayor Zain. She worked as a primary school teacher at the very school I had tried to protect. We had met months earlier when I visited the site for a routine inspection. She had been standing in a dusty classroom, her dupatta pinned carefully, her hands covered in chalk, smiling at a group of children reciting poetry. She had thanked me that day for fixing a cracked window frame. I remembered thinking her gratitude was too big for such a small repair. Now she looked nothing like the calm teacher I remembered. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale under the noon sun. She walked toward me slowly, as if each step required effort. The noise of the city faded into the background. Cars passed, horns blared, vendors shouted, but all I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat. She stopped just a few feet away. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The headlines had turned me into something larger than myself, but standing in front of her, I felt small and uncertain. She had watched the council meeting online. She had seen me hold up the documents. She had seen the board members shift uncomfortably in their seats. She told me later that when she realized the school renovation had been compromised, she felt physically sick. She thought of her students, their laughter echoing through hallways that might not have been structurally safe. She thought of their parents trusting the system. She thought of the ceiling above her classroom. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke that morning. She didn't ask about the investigation. She didn't ask whether I was scared. She didn't praise me for bravery. Instead, she whispered, "Can you hug me?" In that moment, the weight of the headlines cracked open. I had been bracing myself for arguments, accusations, maybe even threats. I hadn't prepared for vulnerability. She stepped closer, and I saw that her hands were shaking. She wasn't asking for romance. She was asking for reassurance, for human contact in a world that suddenly felt unstable. I wrapped my arms around her in the middle of the sidewalk, under the bright Karachi sun. It was a simple hug, but it carried the fear of dozens of children, the anger of betrayed trust, and the fragile hope that someone, somewhere, had chosen to do the right thing. Cameras flashed from across the street. A journalist must have recognized us. The image of that hug would later circulate online, captioned in 100 different ways. Some called it staged. Others called it symbolic. But for us, it was just real. The days that followed were harder than I had imagined. The company suspended me without pay, claiming internal review procedures. Anonymous emails began arriving in my inbox, warning me to retract my statements. My landlord hinted that media attention was bad for business. Even some relatives advised me to apologize and move on. They said powerful men don't lose. They retaliate. But every afternoon, Mare would call to update me about the children. The school temporarily closed for inspection. Parents were angry, confused, frightened. She organized online sessions to reassure her students. She told them that sometimes adults make mistakes, but sometimes other adults fix them. I didn't realize she was including me in that second category until one of her students sent me a crayon drawing of a man holding up a building like a superhero. I wasn't a superhero. I was terrified most nights. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had ruined my career. I had worked at that company for 7 years. I had believed in its projects, its mission to improve infrastructure. Admitting the corruption meant admitting I had been blind for too long. One afternoon, investigators arrived at my apartment to collect further evidence. The process was formal, procedural, exhausting. They asked me to recount conversations, to verify timestamps, to sign statements. My hands shook as I flipped through printed emails. Every signature felt like stepping deeper into a storm. Outside, the day remained bright and almost mocking. Children played cricket in the alley. A fruit vendor arranged mangoes in perfect pyramids. Life went on, indifferent to scandal. Mare started visiting more often, always in daylight. She would bring homemade sandwiches and sit with me on the balcony. We talked about everything except the headlines at first. She told me about her dream of opening a small community library. I told her about my late father, who used to say that integrity is expensive but worth the cost. Slowly, the tension in my chest began to loosen. The investigation gained momentum. Structural engineers confirmed irregularities in the renovation. Financial records revealed diverted funds. The media narrative shifted. The company's confident denial softened into carefully worded statements about oversight errors. The once untouchable Rizwan Qadir appeared on television looking less certain, his smile tighter than before. One morning, as the call to prayer faded into the golden light of dawn, my lawyer called with news. Formal charges were being filed. There would be hearings. There would be consequences. I felt both relief and dread. Justice was moving, but justice is never simple. That same day, I walked past the school building. Yellow caution tape fluttered across the entrance. Mare stood by the gate, supervising maintenance workers. When she saw me, she smiled. Not the trembling smile from before, but something steadier. We stood side by side in the daylight, watching as new materials were delivered. Proper materials this time. Reinforced beams. Certified supplies. The sound of drilling echoed like a promise. She told me she had been scared the day she asked for that hug. Scared not just of collapsing ceilings, but of collapsing faith. She had grown used to disappointment from institutions. Seeing someone risk everything to speak up unsettled her because it challenged her cynicism. The hug wasn't about comfort alone. It was about anchoring herself to proof that courage still existed. I realized then that the headlines had never truly been about me. They were about choice. About the quiet moment when someone decides that silence costs more than truth. Weeks turned into months. The legal process crawled forward. I found temporary work consulting independently. Some companies avoided me, wary of controversy. Others quietly admired what I had done. My world became smaller but more honest. The day the school reopened was brilliant and warm. Parents gathered outside with cautious optimism. Children rushed through freshly painted doors. Mare wore a soft blue outfit, her hair catching the sunlight. She asked me to attend the reopening ceremony, not as a hero, but as a witness. When the ribbon was cut, applause filled the courtyard. I felt something inside me settle. Not pride exactly. Something quieter. Peace, maybe. Near the end of the ceremony, Mare found me standing under a neem tree. She didn't look anxious this time. She looked hopeful. She stepped closer, her voice steady, and asked again, "Can you hug me?" This time, I didn't hesitate. The embrace felt different. Lighter. Not born from fear, but from gratitude. Around us, children laughed and chased each other across a playground that was finally safe. If this story is touching your heart so far, take a moment to engage with this video. Like it, share it, and tell us in the comments about a time you chose courage over comfort. Your story might inspire someone else to stand tall. Before I end, I have one special request. Comment the word courage if you believe one honest decision can change more lives than we ever realize. The court case concluded months later with fines, resignations, and stricter oversight regulations for public projects. Rizwan Qadir stepped down from his position, his legacy forever altered. But the true victory wasn't in headlines announcing penalties. It was in the quiet hum of a classroom where children recited poetry without fear of the roof above them. As for me, my name eventually faded from trending lists. The news cycle moved on. Another scandal replaced mine. But something had shifted permanently inside me. I no longer measured success by promotions or applause. I measured it by alignment, between what I knew and what I did. Mare and I continued meeting in the afternoons. Our conversations deepened. We built something slow and steady, rooted not in drama but in shared values. Sometimes we would walk past the school during lunch break, listening to the echo of young voices.
Through open windows. Every time, I remembered the weight of that first hug. That simple question, "Can you hug me?" had cut through noise, ego, and fear. It reminded me that behind every headline is a human heartbeat. Behind every act of courage is someone who needs reassurance that goodness still exists. In the brightest hours of the day, under a sky that witnessed both exposure and redemption, I learned that doing the right thing will cost you. It might cost your job, your comfort, your sleep. But it can also give you something the world can't take away. The knowledge that when it mattered, you stood up. And sometimes, when the storm is loudest and your name is everywhere for reasons you never imagined, the most powerful response isn't another statement or defense. Sometimes it's simply opening your arms and holding someone who needed proof that the world isn't entirely broken. If this story moved you, don't scroll away silently. Engage with it. Share it with someone who feels afraid to speak up. Let them know that even in the harshest daylight, courage can bloom. And sometimes, it begins with a hug.